The champagne flute trembled in my hand as I watched our blended family gather around the dining room table. My husband David's 50th birthday party in full swing, the air thick with laughter and the clinking of silverware. Alex, our 22-year-old adopted son, sat directly across from me, his broad shoulders stretching the fabric of his dress shirt in a way that made my gaze linger a second too long. I told myself it was just pride. The kind any mother would feel watching the troubled boy we'd taken in at 16 blossom into this confident young man. But when his hazel eyes met mine over the candlelit centerpiece, something unfamiliar fluttered low in my stomach. Speech. David's sister called out, tapping her knife against her glass. My husband stood, his receding hairline glinting in the chandelier light, and began recounting our 20-year marriage with the same practiced anecdotes I'd heard at every gathering. As his words washed over me, I found my attention drifting back to Alex, who was watching me with an intensity that made my pulse quicken. The way his fingers traced the rim of his wineglass-long deliberate circles sent an unexpected shiver down my spine. The cake cutting passed in a blur. David leaned in for a perfunctory peck on the cheek while Alex's hand brushed the small of my back as he reached for the dessert plates. The contact lasted less than a second, but the heat of his touch lingered like a brand through my silk dress. By midnight, the guests had departed and David had retired to bed, leaving me alone in the kitchen with a mountain of dishes and my swirling thoughts. The clatter of plates masked Alex's approach until he was suddenly beside me at the sink. His cologne, something dark and spicy that David would never wear, filling my senses. "Let me help," he murmured, taking the champagne flute from my hand. Our fingers touched, and this time neither of us pulled away. The glass slipped from my grip, shattering against the porcelain sink. We both froze, listening for any sign David had heard. The house remained silent, but something between us had broken just as irreparably. Alex's breath hitched as he stepped closer, his body shielding mine from view should anyone descend the stairs. His hand hovered near my waist, trembling with restraint. One heartbeat, then his lips crashed against mine with a hunger that ignited every nerve in my body. I should have pushed him away, should have remembered I was his stepmother, his guardian, the woman who'd signed his permission slips and nursed him through mono at 17. But as his tongue traced the seam of my lips, all I could think was how long it had been since David had kissed me like this, like I was oxygen and he'd been drowning. The rationalizations came fast. The wine, the loneliness, the way David had barely glanced at me all evening. But beneath the excuses throbbed a darker truth. I was kissing my stepson back with equal fervor, my fingers twisting in his hair as he pressed me against the counter. Somewhere upstairs, David snored obliviously. When we finally broke apart, Alex's pupils were blown wide with desire. "We can't," he started, even as his hand slid down my hips. "No," I agreed breathlessly, "we can't." But when he kissed me again, I didn't stop him. The grandfather clock struck 2 a.m. as I crept up the staircase, my silk robe clinging to skin still tingling from Alex's touch. David's snores rumbled through our bedroom door. The same steady rhythm that had lulled me to sleep for 20 years now sounded like an accusation. I slipped into the ensuite bathroom, locking the door before daring to look in the mirror. My lips were swollen, my hair disheveled, my eyes blazing with a guilty light I hadn't seen since college. The woman staring back at me was someone I didn't recognize. 3 showers couldn't wash away the memory of Alex's hands exploring my body with a hunger that made my knees weak. Nor could they erase the way he'd whispered, "You're so much more beautiful than him," against my throat before we'd finally, reluctantly parted. I told myself it was just one reckless moment, a mistake fueled by champagne and loneliness. But when my phone vibrated at dawn, "Can't stop thinking about you" from an unsaved number, my traitorous heart leapt before my conscience could intervene. We became experts at stolen moments. A brush of hands when passing the salt shaker at breakfast. Lingering eye contact across the dinner table while David talked stocks. The way Alex would accidentally leave his towel in my laundry basket, knowing I'd fold it, knowing I'd press it to my face to breathe in his scent. Every interaction crackled with dangerous electricity. The thrill of getting away with it only heightening the obsession. David noticed nothing. He praised Alex's new maturity, oblivious that the confidence radiating from his son came from secretly betting his wife. "You two seem closer lately," he remarked one evening, patting my knee absent-mindedly before returning to his newspaper. The casual observation made my blood run cold. The first time we truly crossed the line was in Alex's childhood bedroom, the same room where I'd once tucked him in after nightmares. Now at 22, he pinned me against those familiar superhero posters, his mouth hot and demanding. "He'll be home in an hour," I gasped as Alex's teeth grazed my collarbone. "Then we'd better be quick," he murmured, hands already working at my buttons. Afterward, as I straightened my blouse with trembling fingers, Alex caught my wrist. "This isn't just about physical intimacy for me," he said, uncharacteristically vulnerable. The raw need in his eyes terrified me, because I recognized it, saw it every morning in my own reflection. That night, David reached for me in bed for the first time in months. As I dutifully complied, all I could think about was how Alex's touch had felt hours earlier, how alive he'd made me feel after years of emotional neglect. Tears pricked my eyes as David rolled away, satisfied and oblivious. The lies piled up like dirty laundry. I canceled lunches with friends, afraid they'd see the guilt written on my face. Started wearing turtlenecks to hide Alex's love bites. Found myself staring at David over breakfast, wondering if divorce would destroy him less than the truth. Then came the text that changed everything. "I'm late." Not from Alex, from my daughter Sophia at college, the one person who'd always been able to read me. "Coming home this weekend. We need to talk about whatever's going on with you and Alex." The phone slipped from my fingers, shattering on the tile just like the champagne flute had weeks before. This time there would be no cleaning up the pieces. Sophia's unexpected arrival sent me scrambling to erase evidence of our secret. I tore through the house like a hurricane, collecting Alex's stray hoodies, wiping our shared fingerprints from wine glasses, spraying my vanilla perfume to mask the scent of his cologne lingering in our secret spaces. When her key turned in the front door, I was perched stiffly on the living room sofa, hands folded too tightly in my lap, a magazine open to a page I hadn't read. "Mom." Sophia stood in the doorway, her college backpack slung over one shoulder, eyes already narrowed with suspicion. At 20, she'd inherited David's analytical gaze, the one that made defendants squirm in his courtroom. Now it pinned me to the sofa like a butterfly to a board. I made coffee neither of us drank. The silence between us grew teeth. "It's Alex, isn't it?" she finally blurted, slamming her mug down. Brown liquid sloshed onto the granite countertop like the truth neither of us could contain anymore. "God, Mom, I've seen how you look at him. The way you both disappear after dinner." Her voice cracked. "Tell me I'm imagining things." The denial died on my tongue. My daughter's face, so like David's in its openness, crumpled. That night, Alex pressed me against the cold garage wall, his hands rough with desperation. "We could leave tonight," he breathed against my neck. His usual confidence shattered. "Just pack the car and, Sophia knows." The words tasted like ash. His grip tightened. "So what? She's not my real sister. David's not my real father." The casual way he dismissed our family made my stomach lurch. For the first time I saw the boy beneath the man, terrified, orphaned twice over, clinging to me like I was his anchor in the storm we'd created together. David's headlights swept through the garage windows. We broke apart, filled with guilt and fear. At dinner, the tension could have been carved with a knife. Sophia stared at her plate, jaw clenched. David prattled on about a case, oblivious to how Alex's foot traced my ankle under the table. When Sophia suddenly stood, her chair screeching, we all jumped. "I can't do this," she whispered before fleeing upstairs. David blinked after her. "What was that about?" Alex's knee pressed against mine. "A warning." "Promise." "Teenage drama." I lied smoothly, reaching for the wine. My hand didn't shake. That scared me most of all. Later, as David snored beside me, my phone lit up with Alex's text. "My room, now." The house creaked as I crept down the hall, past Sophia's closed door. Alex's bedroom door stood slightly ajar, the glow of his laptop illuminating his bare chest. He pulled me inside. His mouth crashing against mine with a possessiveness that made my head spin. We didn't hear the door open. The gasp wasn't Sophia's. David stood frozen in the doorway. His work suit rumpled, his briefcase dangling forgotten at his side. The look on his face, betrayal yes, But worse, recognition, like he'd known all along and refused to see it, shattered something between us forever. Alex's arm tightened around my waist. Claim. Challenge. The silence stretched, taut as a noose. Then David turned and walked away without a word. The front door slammed. Tires screeched. And just like that, 20 years of marriage ended in the time it took Alex to whisper. Finally. The digital clock glowed 3:47 a.m. as I lay rigid in bed, listening to David's uneven breathing. He hadn't spoken since walking in on us. Just turned and left with a quiet devastation that haunted me more than any outburst could have. My phone buzzed for the 14th time, Alex texting from his room down the hall. "He's not coming back tonight. Come to me." The message burned in my palm, equal parts temptation and indictment. Dawn crept through the blinds before I finally moved. David's abandoned briefcase lay overturned by the door, files spilling across the floor like the pieces of our shattered life. My reflection in the hallway mirror startled me. Dark circles under bloodshot eyes, lips still slightly swollen from Alex's kisses. The woman staring back was a stranger. Sophia's door swung open before I could pass. She took in my disheveled appearance, her face hardening. "I told him," she whispered, voice raw. "After you went to bed, I called Dad at his office and told him everything." Her next words hit like bullets. "He's filing for divorce. And I'm never speaking to you again." The house phone rang then, shrill in the charged silence. Alex answered downstairs, his voice rising in alarm. By the time I reached the kitchen, he was pale, the receiver dangling from his fingers. "That was the hospital," he said. "Dad." David was in an accident. The way he still called him Dad twisted the knife deeper. "They think he might have been drinking. His car hit a guardrail on the interstate. The emergency room smelled like antiseptic and bad coffee." David lay unconscious in the sterile glow of ICU monitors. His forehead stitched, his right arm in a cast. The young resident hesitated before speaking. "Your husband's BAC was well over the legal limit. The officers said they found an empty bottle of bourbon in the passenger seat." Alex sank into a plastic chair, head in hands. I reached for him instinctively, but he flinched away. "This is our fault," he muttered, more to himself than me. The realization seemed to crash over him all at once. What we'd done, who we'd hurt. When he finally looked up, his eyes held a dawning horror. Oh God, he was my father in every way that mattered. The waiting room TV played a morning news segment about a prominent judge's drunk driving accident. My stomach dropped as David's professional headshot flashed on screen alongside footage of our damaged Colonial. The crawl at the bottom read, "Sources say marital troubles may have contributed to incident." Alex's phone buzzed with a text. His expression darkened as he showed me the screen. A gossip blog had already picked up the story, complete with anonymous quotes about a disturbed relationship with his stepmother. The comments section was a graveyard of our reputations. By noon, the first reporter called the hospital. By 2, photographers camped in the parking lot. At 3, David woke long enough to see me standing at his bedside before turning his face to the wall. The nurse quietly suggested I leave. The house felt cavernous without David's presence filling it. Alex paced the kitchen like a caged animal, running hands through his hair until it stood on end. "We need to get ahead of this," he said suddenly, grabbing his keys. "I'm going to talk to Sophia, make her understand." "Understand what?" I snapped, the dam finally breaking. "That we destroyed our family for what? Some twisted fantasy." The words hung between us, ugly and undeniable. Alex's face hardened. "You didn't seem to think it was wrong when you were so close to me last night." The cruelty in his voice shocked me. This wasn't the vulnerable boy from the hospital. This was someone else entirely. The doorbell rang. Through the frosted glass, I saw 2 uniformed officers. My blood turned to ice. Alex answered while I hovered in the hallway, catching fragments of conversation. "Protective order. Stay 500 feet away. Judge Whitmore's request." When the door closed, Alex's hands shook. "He's banning me from the house. From you." The unspoken implication hung heavy. David knew exactly how to punish us both. Without legal ties, Alex had no claim to this family. Me. As he packed his duffel bag, I noticed the framed photo on his dresser. All four of us at his college graduation, David's arm proudly around his shoulders. Alex caught me looking and deliberately turned it face down. "Maybe this is for the best," he said, zipping the bag with finality. There was no kiss goodbye, no promise to call. Just the echo of the front door closing and the hollow understanding that I'd lost them all. My husband, my daughter, and now the boy I'd foolishly thought loved me. The silence was deafening. Outside, a news van pulled up to the curb. Inside, the refrigerator still held the remnants of David's birthday cake. The celebration that had started it all. I sank to the floor, the weight of my choices pressing down until I couldn't breathe. Somewhere in the distance a phone rang. Probably another reporter. Or maybe the divorce lawyer, or the hospital with worse news about David's condition. I didn't answer. There was nothing left to say. The restraining order arrived on crisp legal paper. The ink of David's signature glaring up at me like an accusation. 2 simple pages that severed 20 years of marriage with clinical efficiency. I traced the embossed letterhead with numb fingers. The words, irreconcilable differences. Doing little to capture how thoroughly I'd destroyed our lives. My lawyer's voice buzzed in my ear. Something about asset division and spousal support. But all I could hear was Sophia's shattered voice saying, "I never want to see you again." The house was too quiet without David's nightly news routine or Alex's loud music thumping through the walls. Even the refrigerator hum sounded accusatory. I found myself wandering into Alex's abandoned bedroom, the sheets still tangled from our last encounter. His cologne lingered in the air. But his drawer stood half empty. The framed family photo on his desk now just a dusty outline where it had been. His last text blinked unread on my phone for 3 days before I finally deleted it. David's face stared back at me from every newsstand. The scandal had exploded. Prominent judge's wife in stepson affair screamed the tabloids. My yearbook photo juxtaposed with hospital shots of David's recovery. The grocery store cashier recognized me last week, her polite smile freezing when she saw my name on the credit card. I left my full card in the aisle and never went back. The divorce proceedings moved with brutal efficiency. David's lawyer produced evidence I hadn't known existed, security camera footage from our home system showing Alex and me in the kitchen, my credit card statements for hotel rooms I'd claimed were spa days, even testimony from our housekeeper about changed sheets in Alex's room. Sitting across the courtroom from David, I saw the man I'd loved for 2 decades now looked at me with the same detached professionalism he reserved for convicted felons. Sophia refused to take my calls. Her dorm roommate told me she'd changed schools when I showed up unannounced last month. The look on that young girl's face, equal parts pity and disgust, haunted my dreams more than any confrontation would have. Then came the email from Alex. Not the pleading messages I'd expected, but a cold formal notice that he'd retained counsel to sue for emotional distress and boundary violations. His lawyer's letter claimed I'd taken advantage of his vulnerable position in the family. The dates listed included moments I remembered differently, times he'd initiated contact, gifts he'd bought me, texts he'd sent in the middle of the night. The betrayal cut deeper than any divorce decree. The final humiliation came when David sold our story to a true crime podcast. I listened in stunned silence as he described coming home to find my wife and the boy I raised as my son engaged in unspeakable acts. The host's gasp of horror mirrored what should have been my own reaction months ago. By the time they played the 911 call from David's accident, his slurred voice begging the operator to let me die rather than face this shame, I had to pull my car over to vomit. I tried to find Alex. His apartment was empty. His phone disconnected. His Instagram showed tropical beaches and cocktails, the captions boasting about finally being free. In one photo, his arm draped around a blonde girl who couldn't have been older than Sophia. The timestamp placed it 2 days after David's accident. The house sold last week. The new owners, a young couple with a baby, asked if the stained glass window in the foyer was original. I didn't tell them David installed it for our 10th anniversary. As I packed the last box, I found Alex's high school graduation program tucked behind my desk. His childish handwriting in the margins. "Thanks for being the best mom ever." I burned it in the kitchen sink. Now I sit in this rented apartment, surrounded by half-unpacked boxes, staring at the business card from the therapist my lawyer recommended. The first appointment is tomorrow. I tell myself I'll go. That I won't understand how I became this person. But part of me wonders if some stains don't wash out. The phone rings. Probably another reporter or maybe David's lawyer with more paperwork. I don't answer. There's no one left I want to talk to. The therapist's office smelled like lavender and regret. Dr. Harris sat across from me, her notepad untouched, her eyes never leaving mine as I unraveled the whole sordid story. The first time Alex's hand brushed mine in the kitchen, the way my breath hitched when he smiled at me, the champagne-fueled recklessness of David's birthday party. When I finished, my hands were shaking, my throat raw as if I'd been screaming. Dr. Harris leaned forward. Do you think you loved him? Or did you love how he made you feel? The question hung in the air like smoke. I didn't have an answer. That night I dreamed of David, not the broken man from the hospital, but the way he'd looked on our wedding day. His smile wide. His hand steady as he slid the ring onto my finger. When I woke, my pillow was damp, the empty side of the bed colder than ever. Then the email. It was from Sophia, just 3 lines. Dad's getting remarried. Some associate from his firm, she's pregnant. I thought you should hear it from me. The words blurred. Baby. A new wife. Life erased. I drove to David's new house. A modern thing with a wraparound porch, nothing like our old colonial. I didn't knock, just sat in my car, watching through the window as he laughed with a blonde woman. His hand resting on her swollen stomach. Sophia was there too, setting the table, her smile easy in a way I hadn't seen in years. They looked happy. They looked like a family. Alex found me anyway. He showed up at my apartment unannounced. His tan deeper, his hair lighter, a gold chain glinting at his throat. Miss me? He asked, smirking, as if the last year hadn't happened. I stared at him, really looked at him, for the first time since it all fell apart. The boyish charm had hardened into something calculated. The vulnerability I'd fallen for was gone, replaced by a cold confidence that made my skin prickle. You used me, I said. He laughed. And you didn't use me. You were bored. Lonely. I was just the closest warm body. He stepped closer, his voice dropping. But we're good together, you know we are. For a second I wavered. The memory of his hands on me, the way he'd made me feel alive after years of being ignored, it still sent a traitorous heat through me. Then I thought of David's new baby. Of Sophia's disgust. Of the life I'd burned to ashes. I stepped back. Get out. Alex's smirk faded. You'll change your mind. But I didn't. The next morning I booked a one-way ticket to a coastal town where no one knew my name. I packed light. Just clothes, a few photos of Sophia as a child, and the wedding ring I'd kept hidden in my jewelry box. The therapist had asked me once if I regretted it. The truth. Some days I missed Alex so badly it ached. Other days I hated him, but every day I hated myself more. Taxi honked outside. I took one last look around the empty apartment, then closed the door behind me. Some stories don't get happy endings. Some just end.